My name is Elise Powell. I'm 33 years old. 2 months ago, at Thanksgiving dinner, my mother stood before 14 people and said, "One daughter is a doctor. The other one cleans toilets for a living." Everyone laughed. My sister smiled. My father stared at his plate. What they didn't know was that 3 weeks later, they'd be sitting in a ballroom with 600 people, watching me accept an award for building a $3.2 million company. A company that had been servicing their favorite resort for 5 years. They never thought to ask whose name was on the contract. This is that story. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please stay with me until the end.
To understand what happened at that Thanksgiving table, you need to understand the Powell family. We lived in Arcadia, a neighborhood in Phoenix where the lawns were always green and the garages always held 2 cars. My parents bought the house in 1998 when I was 7 years old. 4 bedrooms, a pool in the backyard, the kind of place where you hosted barbecues and pretended everything was fine. My mother, Marissa, was 60 years old. She'd been an elementary school teacher for 30 years before retiring at 52. She believed in 3 things: God, appearances, and her eldest daughter. My father, Caleb, was 64. He'd spent his career as an accountant at a mid-sized firm in downtown Phoenix. He was a quiet man, the kind of quiet that people mistake for wisdom, but is really just avoidance. His favorite phrase was, "Your mother just wants what's best for you. You know how she is." That was his answer to everything. Every slight, every comparison, every time I was made to feel like I didn't belong at my own dinner table. And then there was Victoria. Dr. Victoria Powell Hartman, 36 years old, board-certified dermatologist. She ran a practice called Scottsdale Dermatology and Aesthetics with 3 other physicians. Her husband, Ryan, was a real estate attorney with his own firm. They had 2 children, Harper, 7, and Mason, 5. They lived in a 5,000 square foot house in North Scottsdale with a 3-car garage and a pool that was heated year-round. My mother posted about Victoria on Facebook an average of 4 times a week. Photos from charity galas, updates about the grandchildren, humble brags about Victoria's latest Botox innovation or Ryan's newest real estate deal. Her Facebook bio read, "Proud mother of Dr. Victoria Powell Hartman." That was it. Just Victoria. As if she only had 1 daughter. I used to scroll through my mother's profile late at night looking for myself. I found 1 photo in 3 years. It was from Easter 2023. I was in the background, slightly out of focus, carrying a casserole dish to the table. She hadn't even tagged me. In the living room of my parents' house, there was a wall. The family wall, my mother called it. 12 framed photographs arranged in a perfect grid. Victoria's wedding, Victoria's medical school graduation, Victoria holding Harper for the first time, Victoria and Ryan at some gala, her in a red dress, him in a tuxedo. I counted once. Victoria appeared in 11 of those 12 photos. I was in 1. My high school graduation, standing between my parents, wearing a cap and gown, smiling a smile that didn't reach my eyes. That photo was in the bottom corner, partially hidden by a decorative plant. Growing up, I was always Victoria's little sister, never just Elise. Teachers would light up when they saw my last name on their roster. "Oh, are you related to Victoria Powell? She was such a wonderful student." And then their faces would fall, just slightly, when they realized I wasn't going to be wonderful in quite the same way. I was a good student, B plus average, honor roll, but not valedictorian. I played softball for 2 years before quitting. I was in the drama club, but never got the lead. I was fine, average, forgettable, and in a family that worshipped excellence, forgettable was the same as failure. When Victoria graduated from medical school, my parents threw a party for 60 people. They rented out a restaurant, there was a live band. My mother gave a speech that lasted 12 minutes and made 3 people cry. When I got my CNA certification at 24, my mother said, "That's nice, honey. Can you pass the salad?" No party, no speech, just salad. When Victoria bought her first house, my parents gave her $30,000 for the down payment. When I moved into my first apartment, a 1-bedroom in Tempe with bars on the windows, my mother asked if I really needed to live alone. Wouldn't it be cheaper to stay home? The message was clear. It was always clear. There was Victoria, and then there was everyone else. For 5 years, I worked at Scottsdale Dermatology and Aesthetics, Victoria's practice. It started as a favor. At least that's how she framed it. I had just gotten my certification as a medical assistant. I was 22, eager to prove myself, desperate to find my place in a family that never seemed to have room for me. Victoria called me one afternoon in March 2013. "There's an opening at the practice. front desk and patient intake. I told the office manager you might be interested. I should have heard the warning in her voice, that slight edge beneath the generosity. But I was young. I was hopeful. I thought maybe this was her way of reaching out, of finally seeing me as something other than a burden. I'm doing this as a favor, Elise, she said before I started. Don't make me regret it. I didn't. For 5 years, I didn't. I arrived early. I stayed late. I learned the names of every patient, memorized their allergies, remembered their children's birthdays. I was the one who calmed anxious patients before procedures. I was the one who stayed until 9 p.m. reorganizing the supply closet because no one else wanted to do it. I never called in sick. I never complained. I never once mentioned to anyone that my sister was one of the physicians. I wanted to earn my place. I wanted them to see me as Elise, not as Victoria's little sister. And for 5 years, I thought it was working. Then came March 15th, 2018, a Friday. 9:47 in the morning. I was called into the office of Sandra Whitfield, the practice manager. She was sitting behind her desk with a folder in front of her and a look on her face I'd never seen before. Elise, please sit down. I sat. We've received some concerns about your performance, multiple concerns. I'm sorry, but we have to let you go. Effective immediately. The room tilted. Concerns? I managed. What concerns? From who? Sandra's eyes flickered toward the wall, toward the door, toward anywhere but my face. I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics, but the decision has been made. HR will process your final paycheck. You have 20 minutes to collect your belongings. 20 minutes. 5 years of my life. Perfect attendance. Not a single complaint in my file. And I was being escorted out the back door in 20 minutes. I packed my things in a cardboard box, a framed photo of my parents, a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest employee," a small succulent I'd kept on my desk for 3 years. As I walked down the hallway toward the exit, I passed Victoria's office. The door was open. She was on the phone, laughing at something. Her chair turned toward the window. She didn't look up. She didn't even turn around. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call. It was from Heather, the receptionist. We'd worked together for 4 years. She was the closest thing I had to a friend at that practice. "Elise, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew." "Knew what?" Silence. Then, "It was Victoria. She went to Sandra. She said you were a liability. She said you made patients uncomfortable. She said you had attitude problems and that it was affecting the practice's reputation." I couldn't speak. None of it was true, Elise. Everyone knows that. But Sandra wasn't going to argue with a physician, especially not one of the partners. The call lasted 11 minutes. I remember because I was staring at my phone the entire time, watching the seconds tick by, feeling something inside me harden with each one. After Heather hung up, I sat in my car in a Walmart parking lot for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, trying to understand how my own sister could do this to me. I had $4,800 in debt. No job, no references I could use, and no explanation I could give to my parents that wouldn't sound like I was attacking their golden child. So I didn't tell them. I told them I left because I wanted to change, because I was burned out, because I needed to find myself. My mother sighed and said, "Well, I hope you find something soon. It's embarrassing when people ask what you do." That night, I called the only person I thought might understand. Not my mother, not my father, not any of my friends who would tell me to confront Victoria, to make a scene, to fight back. I called Aunt Beverly. Beverly was my father's older sister, 67 years old, divorced twice. She'd been a hairdresser for 40 years, working out of a small salon in Mesa called Bella Vita. In the Powell family, she was the cautionary tale, the one my mother referenced when she wanted to scare us into achievement. "You don't want to end up like your Aunt Beverly, do you?" But Beverly was the only one who ever asked me how I was doing without waiting for an answer she wanted to hear. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Elise, honey, what's wrong?" I told her everything, the firing, Heather's call, the realization that my own sister had sabotaged my career to protect her precious reputation. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Beverly said, "Honey, I've been the family disappointment for 40 years. You want my advice?" "Yes." Don't give them the satisfaction of watching you bleed, and don't give them the satisfaction of watching you heal either. Just live quietly. Build something they can't see. One day they'll realize what they missed, and by then you won't need them to. That conversation lasted 43 minutes. When we hung up, I sat on my apartment floor and stared at the ceiling. That was the day I stopped being Victoria's sister. That was the day I started becoming someone else entirely. After I got fired, I had to pay rent. I had $4,800 in debt, no job prospects, and a family that thought I was a failure. So I did what anyone in my position would do. I started cleaning houses. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what I'd imagined for myself at 26 years old. But a friend of a friend knew someone in Paradise Valley who needed help, and I needed money. Her name was Mrs. Catherine Sterling, 65 years old, a widow who lived alone in a 6,500 square foot house with more rooms than she could count. She paid $180 per session, cash, every Tuesday and Friday. For the first few months, I just cleaned, scrubbed toilets, mopped floors, organized closets. It was mindless work, but there was something almost meditative about it. No one was watching, no one was judging. I could disappear into the rhythm of it and forget for a few hours that my life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. But then I started noticing things. Mrs. Sterling's house was spotless, but her life was chaos. Unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen counter, a broken garage door she'd been meaning to fix for 6 months, a refrigerator full of expired food because she couldn't remember what she'd bought. One day, without being asked, I organized her bills into folders by due date. I called a handyman to fix the garage door. I cleaned out her refrigerator and made a grocery list. She cried. "No one has ever done this for me," she said, "not even my own children." That was when I realized something. Rich people don't just want clean. They want invisible. They want someone who sees everything and says nothing, someone who can make their lives easier without ever making them feel dependent. They want control without the effort of controlling, and I could give them that. On September 12th, 2018, I filed the paperwork for Pristine Concierge LLC. The filing fee was $50. The woman at the counter asked what we did. "We make rich people's lives easier," I said. She laughed. I didn't. The years that followed were brutal. I worked 18-hour days. I hired my first 2 employees, Rachel Martinez, a housekeeper I'd met through Mrs. Sterling, and Tyler Anderson, a driver who was between jobs. We took every client we could get: estate management, home organization, personal shopping, errand running. If it made someone's life easier and they could pay for it, we did it. By the end of 2019, we had 15 clients. Revenue was $6,800 a month, barely enough to cover payroll and keep the lights on. I almost quit 3 times. But then, in April 2019, everything changed. I got an email from Mrs. Sterling. She'd told a friend about me. Her friend owned a luxury resort in Paradise Valley called the Mirada. Her previous housekeeping contractor had been caught in a scandal. Employees stealing from guests, shoddy work covered up with bribes. She needed someone new, someone discreet, someone trustworthy. Her name was Diana Westbrook, 58 years old, and she sat across from me in her office on a Tuesday afternoon behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car. "Everyone promises discretion," she said, studying me with eyes that missed nothing. "What makes you different?" I thought about Victoria, about my mother, about all the years I'd spent being invisible in my own family. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, Mrs. Westbrook," I said. "I know how to make other people feel seen while staying unseen myself." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she slid a contract across the desk. $32,000 a month, 24-month term. "Can you handle it?" I said yes. I had no idea if I could handle it, but I figured it out. I hired 8 more employees. I created training protocols from YouTube videos and business books I checked out from the library. I implemented quality control systems, and it worked. Diana signed a second contract. Then she introduced me to her friends. By the end of 2022, I had contracts with 3 luxury resorts and 40 private clients. By November 2024, Pristine Concierge had 42 employees. Our gross revenue for the year was on track to hit $3.2 million. I drove a 2019 Honda Civic. I wore jeans and plain sweaters. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Old Town Scottsdale. And when my mother asked what I did for work, I said, "Just cleaning, Mom, same as always." She never asked follow-up questions. None of them did. I built an empire, and I built it in silence. November 28th, 2024, Thanksgiving. I drove from Scottsdale to Arcadia in 22 minutes. I was wearing jeans, a gray sweater, and boots I'd bought 3 years ago. Nothing flashy, nothing that would raise questions. I brought a bottle of wine, $45. a 2019 Napa Cabernet that I'd read good reviews about. I knew my mother would put it on the counter and never mention it. She'd serve the wine Victoria brought instead, probably something twice as expensive, presented with a little speech about the vineyard. I parked at the end of the driveway. That's where I always parked. The good spots, the ones closest to the house, shaded by the bougainvillea my mother spent $300 a year maintaining, were reserved for Victoria's white Lexus and Ryan's black BMW. When I walked through the front door at 4:15, the house was already full. I could hear laughter from the living room, the clink of glasses, my mother's voice, high and animated, telling some story I'd probably heard a dozen times. I found her in the kitchen. "Oh, Elise, you're here." She glanced at me for half a second, then turned back to the stove. "Good. Can you help me with the gravy? It's starting to lump." No hug. No, "How are you?" No, "I'm glad you made it." Just gravy. I stirred the gravy. The guest list that year was 14 people. My parents, Victoria and Ryan, Harper and Mason running around the backyard screaming about something. My Aunt Colleen, my mother's younger sister, and her husband Pete. 2 women from my mother's church, Judith and Dorothy, both in their 60s, both wearing cardigans and pearls. The Mercers, the couple who lived next door. He was a retired dentist. She was a retired school principal. And Dr. Jennifer Brooks, one of Victoria's colleagues from the practice. 14 people. I knew most of them. I'd seen them at other family functions. They'd watch me grow up, watch me fade into the background, watch me become the sister who wasn't Victoria. None of them knew who I really was, and I intended to keep it that way. For the first 2 hours, I was a ghost. I refilled water pitchers, I cleared appetizer plates, I checked on the turkey. I arranged the silverware because my mother said I'd done it wrong the first time. Not once did anyone ask me to sit down. At one point, I was passing through the living room with a tray of crackers when Victoria's son, Harper, tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Elise?" "Yes, sweetie." "Why are you always in the kitchen?" Before I could answer, Victoria laughed from across the room. "Because that's where she belongs, sweetie." She said it lightly, playfully, like it was a joke. But I saw Aunt Colleen's face, just for a moment, a flicker of something that might have been discomfort. Then it was gone, and the party continued. At 6:47, we sat down to dinner. The table was set beautifully. White tablecloth, cloth napkins folded into fans, my mother's wedding china. 14 place settings arranged with geometric precision. My seat was at the end near the kitchen door, just in case anyone needed anything. My mother stood at the head of the table, a glass of wine in her hand. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and pearl earrings. Her hair had been done that morning. I knew because she'd mentioned it 3 times. "Before we eat," she said, "I want to say a few words." The room went quiet. "I want to thank God for this beautiful family, for my wonderful husband Caleb, who has stood by me for 38 years. She smiled at my father. He nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. "For my grandchildren, Harper and Mason, who bring so much joy into our lives." The children giggled. "For my son-in-law Ryan, who takes such good care of our Victoria." Ryan raised his glass. "And especially for my daughter Victoria, a doctor, a mother, a blessing. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. We all are." Victoria smiled. That perfect practice smile. The smile she used for patients, for photos, for moments when she knew everyone was watching. My mother turned. Her eyes found me. "And of course, for Elise." She paused. The pause was different this time. Heavy. "I have 2 daughters. One is a doctor." She gestured toward Victoria with her wineglass. "The other one? Well," she laughed. A light, tinkling laugh that invited everyone else to laugh along. "She cleans houses for a living, but at least she's good at it." 14 people laughed. I counted. Judith and Dorothy laughed. Pete laughed. Ryan laughed. Jennifer laughed. Mr. Mercer laughed. Victoria laughed loudest of all. My father didn't laugh. He looked down at his plate. Mrs. Mercer didn't laugh. She pressed her lips together and stared at her napkin, but everyone else laughed. And my mother kept smiling, pleased with herself, pleased with her clever little joke at my expense. I felt the room shrinking around me, the laughter pressing in from all sides. 14 people who saw me as exactly what my mother had just described. The maid, the lesser daughter, the embarrassment. Something shifted inside me. I set down my water glass, I placed my napkin on the table, and I stood up. The laughter died. My mother looked at me, confused. "Elise, is something wrong?" I met her eyes, held them. "Mom, I want to thank you." She blinked. Thank you for making it very clear in front of everyone here exactly where I stand in this family. I hope one day you remember this moment, because I know I will. I pushed in my chair, I picked up my purse, and I walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. I was sitting in my car in the CVS parking lot 3 miles from my parents' house when my phone rang. 7:34 p.m. The name on the screen was Aunt Colleen. I almost didn't answer. I thought she was calling to tell me I'd overreacted, that I'd embarrassed my mother, that I should apologize, but something made me pick up. Elise. Her voice was shaking. Hi, Aunt Colleen. I need to tell you something. I should have told you months ago. I didn't say anything. I forwarded you an email by accident back in August. I meant to send it to Victoria, but I clicked the wrong name. When you never responded, I thought maybe you didn't see it, or maybe you'd forgiven us. I don't know. I told myself it didn't matter. My hands went cold. What email? Check your spam folder. The subject line is what to do about Elise. I switched to speaker and opened my email app, spam folder, 3,124 unread messages. I typed in the subject line, and there it was. Dated August 8th, 2024. I opened it. The email chain went back 18 months. 52 messages between my mother, my sister, and Aunt Colleen. The first email was from May 2023. The subject line was, what to do about Elise. Email from Marissa Powell, May 15th, 2023. Girls, I need your advice. Rachel's wedding is coming up in June, and I don't know what to do about Elise. I don't want her there making conversation with guests. What if someone asks what she does? I can't keep explaining away the embarrassment. Email from Victoria Powell Hartman. Agreed. She'll probably show up in her cleaning uniform anyway. Just tell her it's a small ceremony. Family only. She'll believe it. Email from Colleen Daniels. Are we sure about this? She's still family. Email from Marissa Powell. Colleen, sometimes I wish I only had one daughter. Is that terrible to say? I stopped breathing. I read that line again. Sometimes I wish I only had one daughter, my own mother, in writing. I kept scrolling. Email from Victoria, June 2023. The wedding went perfectly. Elise didn't even ask about it. She actually believed the intimate gathering story. God, she's so easy to manage. Email from Marissa, September 2023. Caleb keeps saying we should invite Elise to Sunday dinners. I told him it's easier when it's just us and Victoria's family. She brings down the mood. Email from Victoria, March 2024. Speaking of bringing down the mood, Easter is coming up. Do we have to invite her this year? Email from Marissa. Unfortunately, yes. People will talk if we don't, but don't worry, I'll keep her busy in the kitchen. I kept reading. Message after message. 18 months of my family discussing me like I was a problem to be managed, an inconvenience, a stain on the family name. And then I reached the last email in the chain. Dated November 24th, 2024, 4 days before Thanksgiving. Email from Victoria. Don't worry, Mom. After Thursday, she'll know her place. I have a toast prepared. A toast prepared. She'd planned it. They'd all planned it. The one daughter is the doctor, one cleans houses line wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't just my mother being thoughtless. It was coordinated, discussed, approved. My own family had scheduled my humiliation. I sat in that CVS parking lot for 45 minutes. I read every email twice. Then I read them again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt clear. Like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I'd been stumbling around in my whole life. Like all the confusion, all the self-doubt, all the years of wondering if I was crazy or too sensitive or imagining things, all of it crystallized into a single, unshakable truth. They didn't just exclude me. They organized it. They documented it. They laughed about it in writing. I created a folder in my email. I named it Evidence. I forwarded all 52 emails to my personal account, and then I drove home. But to understand why that email chain hurt so much, to understand why I'd spent 33 years waiting for my family to see me, I need to take you back. Back to the beginning. Back to March 2018, when everything fell apart and somehow, impossibly, started to come together. After Victoria fired me, after I sat in that Walmart parking lot for 2 hours trying to understand how my own sister could destroy me, I had to figure out how to survive. I had $4,800 in debt. Credit cards I'd maxed out during lean months, thinking the job was stable, thinking I had a future at that practice. I started cleaning houses because I had no other choice. Mrs. Catherine Sterling was my first client. 65 years old, widow living alone in Paradise Valley in a house that was far too big for one person. I met her through a friend of a friend who knew I was desperate for work. $180 per session, cash Tuesdays and Fridays. For the first few months, March through June 2018, I just cleaned. I scrubbed bathrooms until my hands were raw. I vacuumed carpets. I dusted shelves that didn't need dusting. It was mindless work, and maybe that's what I needed then. A way to turn my brain off. A way to stop replaying Victoria's laugh, my mother's disappointment, the sound of that door closing behind me at the practice. But Catherine's house told a different story than the one she wanted people to see. The floors were spotless, but her life was falling apart. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, some of them months overdue. The garage door had been broken since November, according to a note she'd left for herself. The refrigerator was full of expired food, Greek yogurt from February, wilted lettuce, takeout containers growing civilizations. One Tuesday in late June, I couldn't take it anymore. I organized her bills into folders, paid and unpaid, due this month, due next month. I called a handyman from a flyer on her refrigerator and scheduled him to fix the garage door. I threw out everything expired and made her a grocery list organized by aisle. When Catherine came home and saw what I'd done, she cried. "No one has ever done this for me," she said, holding the folder of organized bills like it was something precious. "Not even my own children." That's when I understood. Rich people don't just want clean houses. They want someone to see the chaos they're too proud to admit exists. They want someone to fix it without being asked. They want someone who makes them feel in control of their lives without actually having to control anything. And I could do that. I'd spent my entire life reading rooms, anticipating needs, making myself useful without being seen. I'd spent 30 years perfecting the art of invisible labor. On September 12, 2018, I walked into a government office in downtown Phoenix and filed the paperwork for Pristine Concierge LLC. Filing fee, $50. The woman behind the counter was maybe 25, bored, filing her nails between customers. "What kind of services?" she asked without looking up. "We make rich people's lives easier," she laughed. I didn't. The first year was brutal. I worked 18-hour days. I hired Rachel Martinez in October 2018. She'd been working as a housekeeper for one of Catherine's neighbors and was looking for steadier work. In January 2019, I hired Tyler Anderson, a driver who just lost his job when the car service he worked for went under. The three of us took everything: estate management, home organization, personal shopping, grocery runs, picking up dry cleaning, waiting for cable repair people. If someone would pay us to make their life easier, we did it. By the end of 2019, we had 15 clients. Our monthly revenue was $6,800. After payroll, after gas, after the liability insurance and business licenses and 1,000 small expenses I hadn't anticipated, I was barely breaking even. I ate ramen 4 nights a week. I wore the same 3 outfits on rotation. I almost quit in February, then again in May, then again in August. But I didn't. Because every time I thought about quitting, I thought about Victoria's laugh, my mother's toast that hadn't happened yet but that I could already imagine. The way my father never stood up for me. The wall of photos in their living room where I didn't exist. And I kept going. In April 2019, I got an email from Catherine. "Elise, I told my friend Diana about you. She owns the Murata Resort in Paradise Valley. Her previous contractor had some issues. I won't go into details, but let's just say catastrophic is the word she used. She needs someone new, someone discreet, someone she can trust. I gave her your name. She'll be in touch." 3 days later, Diana Westbrook called. We met on a Tuesday afternoon in her office at the Murata. The resort was stunning. 120 rooms, Spanish colonial architecture, rooms starting at $900 a night and going up to $3,500 for the presidential suite. Diana's office was on the second floor overlooking the pool. She sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car, wearing a cream-colored suit, studying me with sharp brown eyes that didn't miss anything. "Catherine speaks very highly of you," she said. "Catherine is very kind. She said you're discreet, that you see problems before they become problems, that you make her life easier without making her feel dependent." Diana leaned back in her chair. "Everyone promises discretion, Elise. Every contractor I've ever worked with has promised me they understand the luxury hospitality business. What makes you different?" I thought about my answer for a long moment. I thought about Victoria, about my mother, about 30 years of being invisible. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, Mrs. Westbrook," I said. "I know how to make other people feel seen while staying unseen myself. I know how to fix problems before your guests know they existed. I know how to make your life easier without you ever having to think about me." She studied me for what felt like a full minute. Then she slid a contract across the desk. $32,000 a month, 24-month term, full housekeeping services, estate management for the property, on-call concierge for our VIP guests. Can you handle it? I looked at that number. $32,000 a month. It was more money than I'd made in an entire year at Victoria's practice. "Yes," I said. I had no idea if I could handle it, but I'd figure it out. I hired 8 more people in May 2019. I created training manuals using information I found on YouTube and in books I checked out from the library. I learned about hospitality standards and quality control. I made mistakes. In the first month, we lost a guest dry cleaning, and I had to personally drive to Scottsdale at 11 p.m. to find a replacement shirt in his size. But we figured it out. Diana renewed the contract in 2021. Then she introduced me to her friend who owned Desert Sage Resort, then another friend who owned Copper Canyon Lodge. By the end of 2020, we had 23 employees and annual revenue of $420,000. By the end of 2021, we had 31 employees and revenue of $1.2 million. By the end of 2022, we had 35 employees and revenue of $2.1 million. By November 2024, we had 42 employees and revenue on track to hit $3.2 million for the year. We operated out of a 4,200 square foot office in Scottsdale Air Park. We had 3 major resort contracts and 40 private clients. We were the leading luxury concierge service in Arizona, and I told no one. I drove a 2019 Honda Civic with a dent in the back bumper. I wore jeans and plain sweaters from Target. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Old Town Scottsdale with rent-controlled rates because I'd been there for 6 years. When my mother asked what I did for work, which she rarely did, I said, "Just cleaning, Mom, same as always." She never asked follow-up questions. Why would she? She'd already decided who I was. There was only one person who knew the truth. In June 2023, I got a phone call from Aunt Beverly. It was 8:47 on a Tuesday night. I was in my apartment reviewing payroll reports. "Honey," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My stomach dropped. "Okay." I had a client in my chair today, Mrs. Thornberry, lives in Paradise Valley. Big house, lots of money, talks too much. Beverly paused. She spent the whole appointment talking about this concierge company she uses. Said they're the best she's ever worked with. Discreet, professional, life-changing. She mentioned the owner's name. I held my breath. Elise Powell. Silence. "That's you, isn't it?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. "Honey," Beverly's voice softened. I almost dropped my scissors. I had to pretend I was adjusting her cape so she wouldn't see my face. "Please don't tell anyone," I whispered. "Please. I'm not ready." "Oh, sweetheart." I didn't say a word, and I won't. She paused. "But Elise, I need you to know. I'm so proud of you, and I understand why you're hiding it. I've been hiding from this family for 30 years. We talked for 2 hours and 14 minutes that night. I told her about Pristine Concierge, about Diana Westbrook and the Murata, about the contracts and the employees and the sleepless nights wondering if it would all fall apart. She listened. She didn't judge. She didn't ask why I hadn't told my parents or suggest I rub it in Victoria's face. She just said, "One day, they'll see." That was her phrase, her promise. One day, they'll see. I just didn't know that one day was coming faster than either of us expected. But there was something else Beverly told me that night, something about my mother that I'd never known. "Elise," she said, her voice careful, "there's something you should know about Marissa, something that might help you understand. I never told you because it wasn't my place, but after everything you've just told me, I think you deserve to know." "Know what?" Beverly took a deep breath. "Your mother's maiden name was Jenkins. She grew up in Glendale, working-class family. Her father worked in a factory, her mother was a seamstress, and she had an older sister, Linda. I'd heard of Aunt Linda. She died before I was born, but my mother never talked about her. Linda was brilliant," Beverly continued. "Beautiful, charismatic, top of her class. She got a full scholarship to UCLA, became a doctor. Your grandmother, Marissa's mother, she worshipped Linda, and Marissa, Marissa was just there, the younger sister, the one who wasn't Linda. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Your grandmother used to say it to Marissa's face. Why can't you be more like Linda? Marissa went to community college while Linda went to UCLA. Marissa became a teacher while Linda became a physician. At Marissa's wedding to your father, your grandmother mentioned Linda 12 times in her speech, mentioned Marissa once. When did Linda die? Car accident, 1995. Marissa was pregnant with you. Beverly's voice was sad. At Linda's funeral, your grandmother gave a eulogy that was 20 minutes long. She talked about Linda's accomplishments, her beauty, her brilliance. She mentioned Marissa once, to say that Linda had been a wonderful sister. I couldn't speak. Your mother spent her entire childhood being the disappointment, Elise, being compared to someone she could never measure up to. When she had Victoria and you, I think she swore it would be different. She wanted both her daughters to be successful, to never feel what she felt. But somewhere along the way, I said quietly, she became what hurt her. Yes, she couldn't break the cycle. She just reversed the roles. Understanding doesn't mean forgiveness, but it means I finally saw my mother as human, damaged, scared, replicating her own pain, still wrong, still hurtful, but no longer a cartoon villain, just a broken woman who broke her daughter. The next morning, November 29th, the day after Thanksgiving, I woke up to a new email. It wasn't from my family, it was from Diana Westbrook. Subject: Arizona Rising Entrepreneur Award. Congratulations, dear Elise. It is my honor to inform you that you have been selected as the recipient of this year's Arizona Rising Entrepreneur Award, presented by the Southwest Business Council. The ceremony will take place on December 18th at the J.W. Marriott Phoenix Desert Ridge. 600 guests, local press coverage, and a speech from you, should you choose to accept. I've watched your company grow from a single employee to an industry leader in 6 years. You've earned this recognition, and I couldn't be more proud to have nominated you. You will receive 10 complimentary tickets. Please let me know if you'll accept. I hope you will. With admiration, Diana Westbrook. I read the email 3 times. December 18th, 3 weeks away, 600 people, local press, and 10 complimentary tickets. I looked at that number, 10 tickets, and thought about the 14 people who had laughed at me 2 nights ago. I could expose them. I could forward those 52 emails to everyone, post them on Facebook, let the whole world see who they really were, watch the facade crumble, watch them feel for once the way they'd made me feel. But that's what they would do. I'm not them. I'm not going to destroy them. I'm just going to stop hiding and let them sit with what they've done. I called Beverly that evening at 7 p.m. Diana Westbrook nominated me for an award, I said. What kind of award? Arizona Rising Entrepreneur. Ceremony on December 18th, 600 people, local press, and 10 tickets. Beverly was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I'm going to invite them. All of them. Mom, Dad, Victoria, Ryan. They'll never come. They will. Ryan already got invited through one of his clients. They think it's a networking event. They don't know who's receiving the award. Another silence. Longer this time. Elise, are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Then I'll be there, front row, with bells on. I smiled. For the first time in days, I actually smiled. Thank you, Aunt Beverly. For what? For seeing me when no one else did. Over the next 3 weeks, I wrote 7 drafts of my speech. The first draft was angry. I named names, I quoted emails, I imagined standing on that stage and watching my family's faces as I read their own words back to them. The second draft was sad. I talked about childhood memories, about wanting desperately to be loved, about the girl who spent her whole life trying to earn a place at the table. The third draft was accusatory. The fourth was self-pitying. The fifth was too long, 15 minutes of rambling that lost the thread. The sixth was too short, 3 minutes that didn't say enough. In the 7th draft, I deleted all of it because I realized something. The best revenge isn't humiliation. It's becoming someone they can't ignore. I didn't need to expose them. I didn't need to quote their emails or describe their cruelty in front of 600 strangers. I just needed to stand on that stage and tell my story, my real story. The one about a woman who was fired, who started over, who built something from nothing. And let them sit in the audience and realize, slowly, painfully, publicly, that the daughter they dismissed was standing in a spotlight they could never reach. The final speech was 9 minutes long. I didn't mention my family by name, not once, but they would hear themselves in every word. December 18th arrived faster than I expected. I bought a dress. Navy blue, $380 from Nordstrom Scottsdale. It was simple, elegant, the kind of dress that said, I belong here without trying too hard. I'd tried on 7 dresses before finding it. The saleswoman had said it made me look like a CEO. I'd smiled and thought, I am a CEO. Beverly came to my apartment that morning at 8 a.m. She brought coffee and bagels and her entire collection of hairstyling tools. Sit, she commanded, pointing at my kitchen chair. For the next hour, she worked on my hair. Loose waves pinned back on one side. Professional, confident. She did my makeup. Not too much, just enough. When she finished, she turned me toward the mirror. You look like a CEO, she said. I am a CEO. She smiled. Yes, you are. At 6:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Instagram. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. Victoria had posted a photo. Her and Ryan dressed in formal attire standing in the lobby of the JW Marriott Phoenix Desert Ridge. She was wearing an emerald green dress. He was in a navy suit. They were smiling at the camera, champagne glasses in hand. The caption read, Networking with my husband at a business gala. Blessed life. Hashtag power couple, hashtag Scottsdale life. They were there. They had no idea. I showed Beverly the phone. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at me. Are you ready? I looked through my apartment window at the Phoenix skyline, the sun setting behind the mountains, the city turning golden in the last light of day. I've been ready for 6 years. I arrived at the JW Marriott at 6:30 through the speaker entrance. Diana Westbrook met me backstage. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the lights, her gray hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. Are you ready? She asked. I walked to a gap in the curtain and looked out at the ballroom. It was filling up. Business leaders in suits and evening gowns, local politicians, journalists with cameras, round tables draped in white cloth, each one topped with a small centerpiece of desert flowers, prickly pear blooms and brittle bush. And there, at table 14, I almost laughed at the number, sat my parents. My mother wore a burgundy dress. My father wore a suit he'd probably owned for 20 years, slightly too big in the shoulders. Victoria sat next to Ryan, her emerald dress catching the light. They were laughing, drinking champagne, completely unaware. I've been ready for 6 years, I said again. The program started at 7 p.m. There were welcome speeches, networking awards, recognition of sponsors, a video presentation about the Southwest Business Council and their mission to support local entrepreneurs. I barely heard any of it. I was watching table 14, watching my mother lean over to whisper something to Victoria, watching Ryan check his phone under the table, watching my father look around the room with the vague discomfort of a man who knew he didn't belong here but couldn't explain why. At 7:45, the MC stepped up to the podium. James Whitman, a local news anchor I recognized from Channel 12. Silver hair, warm smile, the voice of someone who'd delivered 1,000 pieces of news. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, it's my pleasure to introduce the highlight of tonight's program, the Arizona Rising Entrepreneur Award. The room quieted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Chairs stopped scraping. Even the servers along the walls went still. This award recognizes an exceptional business leader who has demonstrated innovation, growth, and community impact in the Arizona business landscape. This year's recipient has built something truly remarkable. I felt my heart pounding. Through the gap in the curtain, I could see my mother adjusting her napkin, Victoria taking a sip of champagne. Pristine Concierge was founded 6 years ago with 1 employee and a vision, James continued. Today, it employs 42 people. It serves 3 of Arizona's most prestigious luxury resorts, and this year, it generated $3.2 million in revenue. A murmur rippled through the crowd, impressed murmurs, the sound of people recognizing success, calculating what it meant. The founder of Pristine Concierge started from nothing. She faced setbacks, she faced doubt, she faced people who told her she would never amount to anything. James paused. Let the words land. I saw my mother's hand go still on her champagne glass. Tonight, we prove them wrong. Please welcome to the stage, Elise Powell. I heard my mother gasp before I even stepped into the light. The curtain parted, the spotlight hit my face, bright and warm and blinding. I walked across that stage with 600 people watching, including the 4 people who had spent my entire life wishing I didn't exist. I didn't look at them. Not yet. I reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces, strangers mostly, but also Diana Westbrook in the front row, beaming. Beverly beside her, already dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, and at table 14, 4 frozen figures. Now I looked at them. My mother's face had gone pale. Her hand was pressed to her chest. Victoria's champagne glass was suspended halfway to her mouth, forgotten. Ryan was leaning forward, squinting like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. My father had closed his eyes. I began. Thank you, James. And thank you to the Southwest Business Council for this incredible honor. My voice was steady, calm, the voice of someone who had practiced in front of a mirror until the words felt like breathing. I want to tell you a story, a true story, about a woman who, 6 years ago, had nothing. I paused. Let the silence breathe. In 2018, I was fired from my job. I had $4,800 in debt. No references, no backup plan. I was 26 years old and I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I saw my mother shift in her seat. Victoria's face had gone from pale to flushed. So I started cleaning houses. Not because I wanted to, because I had to, because I needed to pay rent, because I needed to survive. Another pause. And somewhere along the way, I discovered something. I discovered that I was good at it, not just at cleaning, but at seeing what people needed, at making their lives easier, at being invisible in a way that made them feel visible. I let that word hang in the air. Invisible. I built pristine concierge with my own 2 hands. I started with 1 client, then 5, then 50. I made mistakes. I worked 18-hour days. I doubted myself more times than I can count. I looked directly at table 14, and there were people who were supposed to love me, who told me I would never amount to anything. Victoria went pale again. People who called me an embarrassment. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. People who excluded me from family events because they were ashamed to be seen with me. My father's eyes were still closed. His jaw was tight. To those people, I want to say thank you. The room was absolutely silent. 600 people holding their breath. You gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. You gave me a reason to prove you wrong. I paused, breathed, felt the weight of this moment. This award isn't just for me. It's for every person who's ever been told they're not good enough. For everyone who's been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. For everyone who's been made to feel invisible by the people who were supposed to see them most clearly. I lifted my chin, looked out over the crowd, over the lights, over everything. I see you, and I want you to know, you are not your family's opinion of you. You are not the box they try to put you in. You are capable of so much more than they will ever understand. I took a breath. Thank you. The applause started slowly. 1 person in the back, then 10, then 100, and then, like a wave breaking, the entire room rose to their feet. 600 people. Standing, applauding. I stood at that podium for 51 seconds and let the sound wash over me. The sound of recognition, of validation, of everything I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. And at table 14, my family sat frozen in their seats. They didn't stand. They couldn't. After the ceremony, there was a reception. I was surrounded immediately. Business leaders pressing cards into my hand. Journalists asking for interviews. Diana Westbrook hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. I knew, she whispered in my ear, I knew you were special from the moment you walked into my office. Beverly was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. I'm so proud of you, honey. So proud. But I kept one eye on the ballroom entrance. I knew they would come. At 8:32, my mother appeared. She was alone. Victoria and Ryan must have stayed at the table. Or maybe they'd already left. I didn't know. I didn't care. She walked toward me slowly, like someone approaching something fragile that might shatter. Her face was streaked with mascara. Her hands were shaking. Elise. I turned to face her, the woman who had given birth to me, who had raised me, who had wished, in writing, that she only had 1 daughter. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, the shame, the desperate hope that somehow this could be fixed. Would you have believed me, Mom? She opened her mouth, closed it. Would you have been proud? Or would you have found another reason to compare me to Victoria? She didn't answer, couldn't answer. That's what I thought. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean the things I said. The emails, you meant every word. Elise, please. I'm not angry, Mom. She looked up, startled. I'm not angry, I repeated. I'm just done. I turned and walked away. She called after me. Elise, are you still going to talk to me? Are we still family? I stopped, didn't turn around. We've always been family, Mom. You just never treated me like it. And I kept walking. At 8:45, someone else approached me, someone I wasn't expecting, Stephanie Walsh, the family friend who'd been at Thanksgiving. One of the 14 people who had laughed at my mother's toast. Elise, her voice was quiet. Can I talk to you for a minute? I turned, guarded. Okay. I owe you an apology. She took a breath. I laughed at that toast. I was a coward. I didn't want to make waves. I told myself it wasn't my place. She paused. But watching you on that stage tonight, hearing your story, I realized something. It's always our place. When we see someone being treated badly, it's always our place to speak up. I'm sorry I didn't. I felt something loosen in my chest, something I hadn't realized was tight. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. If you ever want to talk, Stephanie said, not about Victoria, not about your mother, just about life, about what it's like to survive a family that didn't see you. I'm here. You're remarkable, Elise. I hope you know that. We met for coffee the following week. Talked for 3 hours about families and expectations and the invisible wounds that successful people carry. Stephanie became one of my closest friends. Strange how the people who hurt you can sometimes lead you to the people who heal you. In the 3 days after the gala, I received 12 missed calls from my mother. I didn't answer any of them. She left voicemails, long rambling messages that started with apologies and ended with accusations. I'm sorry, but you have to understand how this looks. I'm sorry, but you could have told us. I'm sorry, but this is so unfair to Victoria. I deleted all of them. Victoria sent one email. The subject line was, "We need to talk." I didn't open it. I archived it and moved on. My father called on the 4th day, December 22nd, just once. I answered. Elise. His voice was quiet, tired. It's Dad. I know. Silence stretched between us. 33 years of things unsaid. I'm sorry, he finally said. I should have said something years ago. I should have stood up for you. You should have, Dad, but you didn't. More silence. I know. And you survived anyway. I heard him take a breath, shaky, the breath of a man realizing too late how much he'd lost. I still love you, Elise. I know you do, but love isn't enough when you don't act on it. The call lasted 7 minutes and 41 seconds. When it ended, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not satisfaction, just peace. I didn't cut them off completely. I didn't block their numbers or burn bridges or declare that I would never speak to them again. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. But I stopped chasing. For 33 years, I had been the one who reached out, the one who showed up despite being treated like an afterthought, the one who kept trying, kept hoping, kept believing that someday they would see me. After the gala, I stopped. I let them come to me. And if they never did, if they chose their pride over their daughter, then that was an answer too. Christmas 2024 was the first holiday I didn't spend with my family. Beverly and I went to Maui instead. A week at a beachfront resort, we ate too much, drank too many Mai Tais, watched the sunset every evening from our balcony. My mother sent a Christmas present. I sent it back unopened. Some people would say that's petty. Some people would say I should forgive and forget. Give them another chance. Be the bigger person. But here's what I've learned. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting continued mistreatment. Being the bigger person doesn't mean making yourself small enough to fit into someone else's expectations. I wasn't closing the door forever. I was just stopping holding it open for people who refused to walk through. This story isn't about revenge. It's not about proving my family wrong or watching them suffer or getting the last word. That might be satisfying for a moment, but it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't heal anything. This story is about freedom. For 33 years, I waited for my family to see me. I waited for my mother to be proud of something I did. I waited for my father to stand up for me. I waited for my sister to treat me like an equal instead of a liability. I waited and waited and waited, and they didn't. They couldn't, or maybe they just wouldn't. But here's what I learned. I don't need their permission to exist. I don't need their approval to succeed, and I don't need their love to know that I'm worthy of it. The gala wasn't about humiliating my family. It was about stepping into the light, about letting the truth speak for itself, about standing on a stage in front of 600 strangers and claiming the success I built with my own two hands, whether my family acknowledged it or not. They saw me that night. For the first time in my life, they really saw me. But by that point, it didn't matter because I had already learned to see myself. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the other one in your family, the one they overlook, the one they underestimate, the one they call an embarrassment, I want you to know something. You don't have to prove anything to them. You don't have to wait for them to change. You just have to live, build quietly, grow silently, and one day, when you're ready, step into the light. They'll see you then. But by that point, it won't matter because you'll already see yourself. I am not the embarrassment. I never was, and I never will be again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for seeing me. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the invisible one in your family, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner? Would you have invited them to the gala? And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. I've got more stories coming about boundaries, about family, about what it really means to build a life on your own terms. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are not your family's opinion of you. You are so much more.